going to engage in the judgment. One of the points I made in my original speech to the Heritage Foundation is that the modern liberal must intentionally make himself stupid. He must intentionally pretend he doesn't know things that he does know just to hold on to his ideology. And so, yes, he knows all these things that you and I know. He's just not allowed to factor them into his thinking. My book is called The Kindergarten of Eden for a reason, kindergarten. And I make the argument repeatedly, and I know this sounds like hyperbole. It's not. I mean this as a diagnosis. The modern liberal is morally and intellectually retarded at the level of the 5-year-old child. Right? Why 5 and not 3? Why 5 and not 12? Because 5 is when he enters. 5 is when he enters the kindergarten classroom, and it's the first time that the liberal education establishment gets their clutches on our children, and they instill in them the notion that thinking is an act of bigotry. And for the next 20 years until they graduate from school, this is what they are rewarded and punished based upon. And in the original article that you and I were talking about on the American Sniper, the posting I did on Facebook,
right.
My argument is that 5-year-old children. I'm hearing a woman speaking. Am I alone in that?
No, I don't hear anyone other than you.
Okay, because I'm hearing a woman have a conversation. I don't know where that's coming from. At any rate, because the modern liberal is morally and intellectually stunted, retarded, at the level of the 5-year-old child, he doesn't understand the concept of consequences. So in his mind, because look, there's a book out there written by a liberal that sold millions of copies called All I Ever Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. That's what liberals believe. So you and I, we know that the opposite of war is things like oppression, genocide, Holocaust. But oppression, genocide, and Holocaust are things you learn about after kindergarten. So the modern liberal doesn't really need to know those things. All he needs to know is war is not the answer, which is just the grown-up version of don't hit anyone. That's the rule in kindergarten.
That's exactly right.
Yep. I mean, look, I'll give you a great example of how this works policy-wise. Both the left and the right, whichever you grow up to be, every 5-year-old child loves the United Nations. It's just a great concept, and isn't it wonderful? Somewhere along the line, those of us on the right come to despise the UN, while the modern liberal never changes his adoration for it. He has the same adoration for the UN that he did when he was 5. Why? Is it that he doesn't know what we know? No, he knows exactly what we know. But here's how he processes, and this is how we process the information. When you're 5, you don't know a lot about the world. But somewhere along the line, when you're 10, when you're 12, when you're 20, you learn about how the UN peacekeepers turned their backs so the Rwandans could be massacred. Now, to those of us who think, that lowers the UN in our estimation, in our estimate. But to the modern liberal, it not only doesn't lower them in their estimate, they adore them even more. Why? Because massacres are things you learn about after kindergarten. The rule in the kindergarten classroom is don't hit. Since the peacekeepers didn't hit, the liberal continues to love the UN, even though they led to and allowed mass murder. You and I, and the left as well, along the way, we learn about how Ahmadinejad is invited to spread his and spew his radical genocidal hatred. That lowers the UN in the Republican, the conservatives' esteem. But to the modern liberal, genocide is something you learn about after kindergarten. So he doesn't really need to know that fact. He doesn't factor that into his thinking. What he knows is that the rule in kindergarten is that everybody must be invited to the party. So when Ahmadinejad is invited to the party, that raises the UN in the liberals' esteem. Right? We both learn about how the Iranians were made head of the the Women's Rights Committee, and the Sudanese were made head of the Human Rights Committee while they were committing genocide. And to those of us who think, that lowers the UN in our esteem. But to the liberal, genocide is something he learns about after kindergarten. It doesn't matter. He doesn't factor it into his thinking. What he knows is that in kindergarten, the rule is every child must get a turn. It was the Sudanese turn. And so the liberal continues to love the UN because they never get past the kindergarten mentality.
You know what? Dude, you're even smarter than I thought you were, and I thought you were pretty damn smart coming in. But the title, yes, it's good. This guy is brilliant.
Absolutely. You know, it was funny. It's funny. It reminds me. Before you got on, I'm not sure if you were listening, Evan. We were talking about the American Sniper and talking about Hollywood and movies, and I brought up Spielberg. And I brought up Munich, and I brought up Saving Private Ryan, where Spielberg kind of had to twist on the response to the Palestinian murders to make it kind of equivalent, because he was just uncomfortable with the idea of identifying evil as evil. And then in Saving Private Ryan, at the end, Tom Hanks' character says, hey, hopefully this will make all this sacrifice that we did worthwhile, so that that Ryan could go home, completely ignoring the fact that the sacrifice was actually on the behalf of taking out the Nazis.
Right. Yeah, I attended a symposium at Pepperdine University right after Munich came out. And it was basically, I don't recall if everybody was Jewish, but it was mostly Jewish on the panel, and 3 liberals, 3 conservatives. The liberals loved the movie. The conservatives hated the movie Munich. And I stood up at the end and I said, I can bridge this gap right here. I said, look, there's not a person in this room who doesn't agree that it was a beautifully made movie. Spielberg is a spectacular director. And I don't think there's anybody here who's going to disagree. It was a terrifically acted movie. Eric Bonner, I think is his name, is a terrific actor. The reason the people on the left love this movie, I said, but here's one thing we won't disagree on either. It was not an historically accurate movie. Time and time and time again, Spielberg took license to manipulate the facts. And in every case, he did so to make the Palestinians more understandable and more provoked, and the Jews more culpable. The liberals loved this because it was lying for the bigger truth, which is that all cultures are equally good and equally right. The Jews weren't completely the victims. The Palestinians weren't completely the terrorists. The conservatives who care about the truth despised the license that Spielberg took, because we don't believe in lying for the bigger truth. And the problem with the liberals lying for the bigger truth is that if you have to lie, then maybe it's not true. You know, they were okay with lying about hands up, don't shoot, because our cops are horrible racists gunning down black people. But you know what? If that's really the case, then you don't need to lie about this thug, Michael Brown. Find another example. They were okay with lying about the Duke University kid. They were okay with Lena Durham lying about being raped on campus, because the bigger truth, and what you find is the liberals lie and lie and lie and lie for the bigger truth, but the bigger truth is a lie.
Evan, I want to talk about something you kind of alluded to it, and Hausman and I actually kind of talked about it a bit last time, last segment, and you and I actually talked about this on my previous show. But I want you to explain once again something you told me a while back, because I know a lot of listeners, and I know a lot of conservatives in general. And this goes back to Spielberg and Jews, a lot of Jews in America in general. There is no better friend of the nation of Israel than the conservatives in this country, than the Republican Party. Yet, from the example you just gave us, Spielberg, Hausman talked about it, as it related to Private Ryan. It seems that a majority of, it doesn't seem. I mean, American Jews overwhelmingly vote Democrat year in, year out, decade in, decade out. Can you explain that to the listeners, why that happens? Did we lose Evan?
In order to call yourself a Jew, in order to be called a Jew, when you walk out of the voting booth and they say, excuse me, who did you vote for? And, okay, how would you describe yourself? In order to be called a Jew is different than any other religion that's out there. In order to call yourself a Christian, you have to believe something. You have to believe that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior. If you believe that, you're a Christian. If you don't believe that, you're not a Christian. If you do believe that, then there are certain rites and rituals, practices and behaviors and beliefs that tend to follow. In order to call yourself a Muslim, you have to believe something. You have to believe the Quran is the final testimony of God and Muhammad is perfect messenger. If you believe this, you're a Muslim. If you don't believe this, you're not a Muslim. If you do believe this, there are certain rites and rituals, practices, behaviors, and beliefs that tend to follow. But in order to be called a Jew, you don't have to believe anything at all. In order to call yourself a Jew, all you have to do is plop out of a Jewish womb. Okay. All right, so
That's just so brilliant.
Okay, and I call these people the plopping Jews. And unfortunately, some people call them the secular Jews. I think Dennis Prager calls them the non-Jewish Jews. And to expect somebody whose entirety of their Jewishness is the accident of the vagina they fell out of, to have any sort of affinity for or understanding or any Jewish moral beliefs is almost an act of bigotry.
Okay, but you still, Evan, but you still have the Evan, you still have the political aspect of it. You know, and I don't want to stereotype even positively, but I would guess a majority of, well, shoot, that sounds stereotypical, but I'm sorry. Majority of Jews work hard, you know, they own businesses and, you know, whatever. I don't get I get the dropping out of the womb part. I don't get the politics aspect of it.
Okay,
at least I didn't before you explained it to me.
Here's the politics aspect of it. Let me try it this way. The Jews who are non-moral Jews, who are Jews by culture, who might be Jews by some affinity, who might just say, what if there's another Holocaust, they'll come after me too, even though I'm not a practicing Jew. They see two parties in America. Right? They see a party that is dominated by Christian values, the Republican Party, and a party that is dominated by no values. And they feel more comfortable in the party of no values than what they wrongly see as a party of antithetical values. They're afraid of the Christian right, and they feel much more comfortable in the amoral left. The problem is that the Christians in America are, first of all, they consider themselves Judeo-Christian, and the values of the Judeo-Christian right are the values of the Jews. In fact, modern liberalism, amorality, is the antithesis of Judaism. Judaism is going to the greatest minutia in order to do the right and just things. But liberals don't believe in justice. They despise the concept of justice, which is why they insert a modifier before the word. They don't seek justice, they seek social justice, a modified version of justice, which is the antithesis of true justice.
You know
true
what?
Justice, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. We got 2 minutes. Would love to have you back. We have 1 minute, I was just told. How can people buy your book, and where should they follow you, man?
All right, everybody, right now go to Evan Sayet, EVAN, S as in Sam, AYET.com. Watch my speeches, buy my book, tell your friends, sign up, EvanSayet.com.
Listen, we still got to have you back. Obviously, you're a friend of the show, and we love having you on. We still got to talk Zeppelin and Springsteen. And when you come back, dude, we're going to play that YouTube of you singing Thunder Road. Thanks, Evan.
It's got 1,200 views. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mike and Mike.
It's great, man. Okay, this is The Right Mics with, the aforementioned mics. Don't go away. Hausam and I will come back. I'm sure we're going to talk some more about the tax stuff, and I hope you listen because we can give you some insight. We'll be right back. You be back, too. Don't go away.